The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Lining up Adrian Neville, and here it comes. Connects.
Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of getting confused here. Game Day. Crazy, or somewhat crazy week in the NFL. I think we had a couple Saturday games, and that's where we saw a lot of the craziness ensue, such as Indy having a 33-0 lead, like in the third quarter or something like that. I know they had like a 30-0 lead at half, and blowing it. Letting Kirk Cousins come back and throw for 460 yards and 4 touchdowns. Dalvin Cook running for 95 yards and a touchdown. Making 4 catches for 95 yards and also rushing for 95 yards. Impressive game there. Justin Jefferson, of course, 123 yards and a touchdown. Adam Thielen, 41 yards and a touchdown. Pretty insane comeback from Minnesota. I was especially watching this game closely because it's the playoffs for my fantasy football league, and I was forced to pick up Kirk Cousins because Kyler Murray went down and I didn't have any other options. And so I started him. And, let's just say fantasy this week did not go well. Miles Sanders has got to be the worst first overall pick, and I hope to never pick first ever again because literally the team I got from drafting that first overall was pretty terrible. And even with all the trades I made, they weren't even bad, and it was just like there was no saving my team. So pretty much sucks. I don't know why the thing still says I have a I don't know why the thing says I still have a 1% chance of winning when literally all games have been played. This thing's probably just not updated. Baltimore, for whatever reason, lost to Cleveland, and so, Lamar Jackson wasn't playing. But, that basically just leaves, to me, that just leaves, Cincy as running away with that division, even though it's kind of close still between the two of them. It's like, Cincy's looking like the better team here. And then, Miami loses a close one to Buffalo, who seems to be running away with their division. Josh Allen, 304 yards and 4 touchdowns. I really need to look at the MVP race and look at the stats to determine who I think's running away with MVP. Let's see. Pittsburgh beat Carolina. The Chiefs were struggling against the Texans for a while. Odd that, so many teams are struggling with the Texans so far. The Cowboys lose in overtime with Dak Prescott throwing a pick 6 in overtime. And they lose to the Jacksonville Jaguars 40-34. Absolutely insane. I wish they could have lost the game last week to Houston as well. But, man, pretty crazy game to see Dallas drop there. Atlanta somehow drops their game to New Orleans, which kind of sucks in terms of the Eagles pick. And also just, who the heck's going to plan on winning the NFC South at this point? The Lions beat the Jets, and they improved to 500 at 7-7. And they're in the wild card hunt, surprisingly. Going to be a scary team. I mean, not scary in the sense of, I don't really expect them to knock out too many teams, but with the momentum they have, hey, any given Sunday, Denver finally won a game. They're still 4-10. Don't have Russell Wilson. Wasn't really the best game. New England loses to the Raiders in one of the most absolutely baffling plays I've ever seen. I don't get why they just didn't go into overtime. Did they not trust their team enough? Did they not want to give it up to chance? I have no clue, but absolutely baffling play to just watch unfold. The Chargers beat the Titans. I think Ryan Tannehill went down. don't remember for sure. Since he beat Tampa Bay pretty convincingly, Joe Burrow 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. Absolutely insane game from him. New York beat Washington this time. Didn't tie with them. And then on Monday night, the Packers beat the Rams. Probably a much more anticipated matchup at the start of the season, but with both teams being terrible, it was just a Monday night game. There's not really much at stake here. But so, moving on to a real confusing game, if I do say so myself, especially after watching the highlights and just being really confused by not only the stat lines, but a bunch of different plays and just the sort of play style they went with this game. I don't know. Jalen Hurts, 22 passes for 315 yards, but he didn't have any touchdowns. Instead, he had 2 interceptions, which, I don't know, they were pretty bad interceptions. I was really confused on why, out of all throws, he was making those throws, and it was just like, oh man, what are you doing, Couldn't really get nothing going for any of the running backs. Miles Sanders had 11 carries for 42 yards, but he had a fumble. Kenneth Gainwell only had 3 carries for 5 yards. I heard people saying it started to rain, but then if it was starting to rain, why didn't you just run it more with them? They instead ran it more with Jalen Hurts, who had 17 carries for 61 yards and 3 touchdowns on the day rushing, which is why I said it was a real confusing game to just see. And then the receiving, obviously, just going off as they usually do. Devontae Smith, 5 catches, 126 yards. A.J. Brown, 9 catches, 181 yards. Absolutely dominating. And then the defense, though they let up 20 points, they got 6 sacks on the day, 3 forced fumbles with one of them recovered. And I think the game ball on defense goes to Hassan Riddick this game because he had 2 of those sacks and he had 3 solo tackles on his own, 2 QB hits, and he forced a fumble and got it back. Absolutely insane game from Hassan Reddick, really coming into his own and has been a real good addition to this defense. Glad we picked him up and glad they've found that role for him, as well as Javon Hargrave getting 2 sacks and Josh Sweat getting 2 sacks, another player coming into his own. Real good. No interceptions on the day, but still really good for the most part, as we let up a passing touchdown, but none of the receivers really went off, or went for a good amount of yardage. We did a decent job of holding the run game, but not too well. David Montgomery had 12 carries for 53 yards and a touchdown, and then 3 catches for 38 yards and a touchdown. But the main issue was always going to be Justin Fields. This guy is quite insane. The fact that he's just elevating this team far above what they should be. I know that doesn't make too sense when you look at their record, but this guy is elevating the talent around him when he doesn't even have that much to begin with. And 4 passes for 152 yards and 2 touchdowns, 15 carries for 95 yards, but he did have 2 fumbles, which is where the defense came up. But, I think only one of those got recovered. But still, nonetheless, they kind of struggled with containing the run against him, which has kind of always been a struggle with this defense. But, they did a good job of at least keeping it in check to where it was they let him run for a lot, but they tried to make up for it with the passes and, not let them get too much momentum going. But it was still a pretty close game, 25-20. It's a real confusing game to really break down because it's you see them struggle so much against that run, but then on their side as well, it's I don't know. It was real confusing to watch, especially with the news that came out yesterday that Jalen Hurts might not make it to this Cowboys game on Christmas Eve because he may have suffered a minor shoulder injury. And it's well, then why were you continually rushing with him if you have, Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, and why am I blanking on his name, dude? Oh my gosh, Kenneth Gainwell. You have those 3, guys that can just, hold that offense. Especially, look at the last game. Our last game against the Giants. That's literally what they did. Not only the game against the Giants, but all the way back to the Packers game as well. It's like, I don't know. It's kind of confusing to me that, like, why didn't you just put it on the shoulders of your running back room when you know they can do it? Last week against the Giants, Miles Sanders had 17 carries, 144 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Boston Scott, 33 yards and a touchdown. You can put the game in their hands, especially against a team like the Bears, who aren't going to be much of a threat to you, you know? Same thing with, no, not the Titans game. Titans game, we didn't really run much. We instead chose to pass more. But the Packers game, and that's the one I was referencing as well. Miles Sanders, 21 attempts, 142 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Kansas Gainwell, 839-1. Boston Scott, 324. And then even in that game, Jalen Hurts had the 17 for 157. You know, and so it's like, you can put trust in Miles Sanders. I know he had that bad fumble, but like, when you're going against a team like the Bears this late in the season, when you don't want to risk too much, you can afford to run with these guys instead of having to run with your quarterback, you know? I don't know. That's just kind of my thinking towards this game because of the fact that, like, we don't know where Jalen Hurts stands at this moment, where it's like they're saying, like, oh, it's Jalen Hurts. You never know him. He can pop in, like, Wednesday, Thursday and be like, oh yeah, I'm fine, I'm ready to go, and he'll actually be fine and ready to go. Or you get to Saturday and you're like, okay, guess we're starting Gardner Minshew. And it's like, I don't know, it's just so confusing to me, you know? It's like, it's the whole game as well, because it's just like, they were getting it going, you know, through the passing lane, somewhat through the rushing game, but not really, and it's just like, I don't know, when you see a stat line like, when you see that Jalen Hurts threw for 315 yards, it's kind of surprising to see that the game was not only close, I mean, it was not, I mean, I don't know, they kind of closed the gap late in the game, but we were pretty convincingly, you know, keeping ahead of them. But I don't know, it's just kind of confusing to look and see how dominant the passing game was and how little we were doing rushing, but yet still struggling, especially defensively. Like, I know I said we got those 6 sacks, but like, they were really struggling, especially in like that first half with Justin Fields just running all over the place. Glad to see them like make changes and then started forcing, you know, Justin Fields to really start passing. But I don't know, it was a real confusing game for me. I don't know. I don't really have too much to say this week, especially on the game. Looking forward to the next couple weeks. We got Dallas on Christmas Eve as well. Again, win or loss, you're going to see me here on this podcast to talk about it. We got the Saints after that on the New Year, January 1st. And then we got the Giants again. I forget what I've predicted, but let's see. I think the Saints game is a win. I think the Giants game, that one's tough. Let me go back to, okay, so this Cowboys game, I still think it's a loss, especially now without Jalen Hurts. I mean, we have the weapons to win this game, and it would be funny if we won with our backup when Dallas couldn't beat us with their backup, you know. But then, you know, there's going to be the people like, oh, Jalen Hurts is a system quarterback because he has all these weapons and it's not him that's elevating the offense. It's his whole team, you know. But I still think if Jalen Hurts is unable to play, this might be a loss. But again, I'm not saying we're going to get blown out on Christmas Eve. I'm not saying we're going to, like, struggle. I think this is still going to be a close one even if Gardner's playing. And, you know, I think it should be a close one for sure. I think we can still keep it close with them and even pull out the win. Obviously, the Saints one's a win. And I think this last game will probably be resting most of our guys. And the Giants may still be fighting for a playoff spot. So I think that one may be a loss just because of the fact of, like, we're probably going to be playing our third starters. So at this point, we may have the first seed and home field advantage locked in, you know. So it's like, I don't think we win that game solely because it's going to be like third stringers and practice squad guys playing while New York is fighting for a wild card spot, you know. I think that's just the way that turns out. Looking at the rest of the league, let's see. This is an interesting thing to take a look at when it comes to the rest of the standings. So looking at the playoff picture, Buffalo 11-3. They have the advantage over Kansas City because of their tiebreaker. Kansas City already clinched their playoff spot, and they clinched their division. I mean, and so they still have a clinched playoff spot. Buffalo as well. Cincy still really hasn't because they're fighting it out with Baltimore. And I guess even Cleveland has a chance. I don't really get how that one goes. I mean, they haven't clinched their division. I would think they clinched their playoff spot, though. That's kind of confused. Oh, because no, if Baltimore clinches over them, they still have to worry about Miami and LA. Duh. The Titans, of course, are their freaking 7-7 because of their terrible division. They're going to be a first-round exit, guaranteed. I don't think New England and the Jets are going to be really fighting that much for those playoff spots. I think Miami and the Chargers got it locked in, and even Baltimore might lock in. The NFC, so we've clinched a playoff spot, or a playoff berth, but we haven't clinched our division. Minnesota has clinched their division at 11-3. San Francisco clinched their division at 10-4. Tampa 6-8, another one that's like, I don't know. We keep saying, it's going to be Tom Brady. He's going to walk in and win a wild card game and stuff like that. But, like, I don't know. These NFC South teams are pretty embarrassing. It's like, and if you're wondering why I'm, like, so salty towards these divisions, because it's like for years, the NFC East had to hear about how they were the worst division and all that and how they were struggling. But it's like, at least the division was competitive and was always fighting back and forth for the most part. You know, it's why there's never been back-to-back winners in like the last 10 years or something like that. But it's like you have divisions like the NFC South and AFC South that are just absolutely terrible, and like no one's giving them flack. Like other than a couple of people, I've never seen anyone say nothing about Tennessee just winning these absolute last couple of years because of the fact that the Texans, the Jaguars, and the Colts are so terribly bad, or the Bucs and Saints were kind of trading back because the Falcons and Panthers were terrible, you know. But looking at the standings, like I said, Detroit is still trying to make that push right now. Seattle, they're at 7-7. I don't know. They could do it, but I don't think they got it, man, because it's like they went on a crazy 4-game winning streak, and then after that Cardinals win, a loss to the Bucks, a loss to the Raiders. They beat the Rams, but then they lost to the Panthers and lost to the 49ers. That is 1-4 in their last 5 games, and they have the Chiefs next. I don't know. I don't think it fares too well for Seattle. Washington holds the 7th spot right now because they're 7-6-1. Looking at their remaining schedule, they have the 49ers. That's a loss. They have the Browns. That could be a win, but then they have the Cowboys. I think that's a loss. I don't think they hold that 7th spot. I really think Detroit gets it, especially because Detroit has the Panthers, the Bears, and the Packers. I think Detroit gets that final 7th seed spot. They may even climb up to the 6th seed because the Giants have to play the Vikings, the Colts, and the Eagles. They could probably beat the Colts. And again, never mind. They might still hold that 6th seed spot just because, like I said, if they're fighting for a playoff spot, they might beat the Eagles. I don't think they're beating the Vikings on Christmas Eve, though. And they maybe could beat the Colts, you know. But, you know, so I think maybe they secured their 6th seed spot. Dallas has already clinched the 5th spot at 10-4. They could even miraculously get the division, I think, if they win out, I believe it is, and we lose out. Oh, yeah, especially because if we lose to them, we would be at, well, actually, how would that work? Tiebreaker, because we would one, and if they were to win one, man, that's a tough one to look at. But yeah, I think Detroit sneaks into that 7th spot. I really don't know what the NFC South's going to look like. Man, this is a real interesting playoff bracket, for sure. But to basically summarize everything, I think the Eagles maybe lose 1 at least in these final 3 games. I think the Lions get that 7th spot over the Commanders. And I think the AFC, the way it's looking now, I think it remains the same for sure. But with that being said, thank you all for joining for this episode of Game Day. And as always, many things in this life may seem impossible, but remember, if you fight for your dreams will fight for you. Thank you, and I'll catch you on the next episode.